Hello, my name is John Brink and we are podcasting on the Brink from downtown Prince George. Prince George is the capital of British Columbia, an absolutely amazing place, and if you already can see, it's a wintry day, it's snowing today, quite a bit actually, but still a very, very beautiful day. I have a very special guest today. Her name is Jenn Cooper, and Jenn is a member of the RCMP, and her job is a media
relations officer.
Media relations officer.
Yes.
Welcome to the show.
Thank you
Jenn.
very much. Thank you for having me.
So, the RCMP is always very important to. Now, okay, let me say another thing. Happy anniversary of the RCMP annual anniversary, that is today, in fact.
That's right. It's our RCMP Appreciation Day.
And that's what it is.
Yes.
So, and this morning, I have to tell you this, because this morning I was usually go to Starbucks, and I was sitting there, and then Scott helped me a little bit, just making sure that I knew that I was talking to Scott, and he said, "Did you know?" And so that it is the RCMP Appreciation Day today, and so there was 3 RCMP sitting about 2 tables away from me, so I got up and I walked over there and I said, "I just wanted to tell you today is the RCMP Appreciation Day, and I want to thank you for your service." And they went like, "Oh my goodness," So it was so much special. And for those people that are watching again, it's a special day, and I'm very honored to have you actually at this day in particular. That is very important.
Yeah, it kind of worked out nicely.
Yeah, and so maybe tell me a little bit more about that. What is today other than the obvious? Is it something specially where the RCMP gets into the community and community things happen because of this day in particular, the Appreciation Day?
I think we'd find different things happening nationally. In Prince George, we've kind of left it as business as usual today.
Yeah.
But it's definitely a day that people are encouraged to take a moment and reflect on the stuff that we do for our communities. I know sometimes it's a rough go for RCMP in the media or in the public eye, and it's kind of a day to pause and reflect on all the good stuff that we do, because there's a lot of good that RCMP do in our communities as well.
No question about that. It's critical, actually, and a lot of times challenging. So we'll talk about that a little bit. But first, I want to know a little bit more about you. You are from the Lower Mainland.
I am, yes.
And then so you got your education there, and then you never went too far away from there. The furthest you were is about Kelowna. What then made you become or go into the training to become an RCMP individual? Because that's quite a challenge,
It is. It was a very challenging time in my life. I was a young adult. I'd started going to university. I actually wanted to be an elementary school teacher.
Okay.
So I was going to university part-time. I was working part-time and trying to afford to live. And even back 10 plus years ago, it was a little bit difficult to go to university and support yourself at the same time.
Right.
I had friends that were RCMP officers, and I loved hearing their stories, and I thought, I bet I could do that. So I put my application in, and figured I'd either graduate university or I'd get accepted into the RCMP. One of the two would happen first. So RCMP called me up, and I went. That was 2011.
2011.
Yeah.
If you went, that to me means, correct me if I'm wrong, the training is in Regina.
That's right.
And it's pretty
this is intense.
This is not. Now, I was I was born in Holland in 1940, right. And then when I was 18, we were drafted into one of the forces, Marine, Army, or Air Force. I wanted to be in the Air Force. I wanted to be a pilot. That didn't happen. So what they did, they put me into the security and not quite RCMP, but it was the security.
Right.
And so that's what I did then.
Like military police then, or?
Pardon me?
Kind of like similar to our military police?
Probably similar to that.
Okay.
Yeah. So and the training was very intense. Normally it was about 3 months for intensive training. This was more than 6 months.
Okay.
And then you had, an Uzi machine gun, and then you had a carabine and the Smith & Wesson 45. I never had a gun, or never even knew what they looked like, but it was all part of the training. And so it was quite some training. Now, from some of my friends that were in the RCMP, tell us a little bit about, and I'm sure that we have people watching. And we usually do have people watching all over the world, actually, to the programs. That's the beauty of social media right now. And, but also we have people from far and wide, but also other individuals, young people in particular, that are searching for career opportunities. And they will be looking at you as somebody and saying, interesting, maybe that's a career that I want to pursue potentially. So tell us a little bit about, so that's what triggered you. Then you applied when they were recruiting, and then they send you to Regina for how long?
6 months, so 24 weeks.
24 weeks.
Yeah.
And the training then involved?
Everything. It's a paramilitary environment, so not quite as strict as the military, but not as laid back as going to university. It's kind of a blend. So I had to learn a lot of things I'd never done before.
Right.
Things similar to the military, like making your bed in a very specific manner.
I did it.
Cleaning your room.
I still do that now.
Do you? I gave up some of those. I don't have quite the hospital corners and tight bed sheets
All
anymore.
of that,
but so ironing your bed sheets in the morning, making sure everything is laid out in a very specific manner.
Yeah.
Making sure your room's cleaned in a manner.
Clothing, all
your clothes had to hang the same way.
Yeah.
All your shirts had to be buttoned on the hangers.
Right.
All your shoes had to be laced where they were.
Yeah.
If you were leaving shoes behind, they had to be even, laced up so it was tidy and everything like that.
Yeah.
So, big learning curve for me coming from kind of my really laid back teenager, young adulthood.
Yeah.
Even back then you could show up to university in sweatpants if you wanted to, and that's not the case going to Depot, our training facility. So big learning curve.
So then as a female, the more and more women are getting into the force.
Yeah.
Not so much before though, is that getting more and more the case?
We're still less than our goal of 33%. So we'd like the force to be a third female.
Okay.
But it's a little bit tougher to recruit women into the RCMP.
Yeah.
I don't think it's necessarily first on young girls' minds to be an RCMP officer. I have I just actually was talking to a young girl who wants to be an RCMP officer, but she thought she'd be too small.
Right.
And I looked at her, I said, sweetie, you're the same size as me and I'm here.
Yeah.
So I had a girl in my troop, so that's what we call our groups when we're going through as a troop. I think she was 5'1".
Yeah.
So, it takes anybody
You see,
to be an RCMP
that's
officer.
still a bit of a myth, a misunderstanding that if you want to be an RCMP individual, you have to be big and tall and all the other kind of things. Not so.
No, not true at all.
No.
We have, I think in the detachment, we have, me at 5'5", and we have a fella who works with us who's 6'10".
Yeah.
So we're 6'9".
Yeah.
So, quite the range of people working for the RCMP, and it takes all kinds. We say we have 150 different specializations, and they're not cookie cutter.
Right.
So it takes a wide variety of people, and I think the RCMP as a whole benefits from having more people from varied backgrounds with varied skill sets.
I agree.
Than, kind of the cookie cutter that it used to be, a few decades ago.
Yeah, the profile one would be looking for. So the other thing about it, so they were in Regina for 6 months, and then you know, and we don't talk too much about family, but obviously you're married and you have children, and you know, so then what happened is, there you're getting trained in Regina, and where do they put you? Terrace.
Yes.
Oh my God.
So that's a funny story. We don't all get our postings at the same time. They kind of roll them out a person at a time over a couple of weeks.
Is your husband RCMP?
My husband is RCMP, yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
So I remember sitting in class, and our facilitator walked up to the front of the room and he drew a really rough sketch of BC. We're like, okay, someone's going to BC, but we didn't even know who yet. Someone's going to BC. Okay, that's good.
Now you didn't even know you would go to BC.
I didn't even know. No.
Yeah,
so
for all intents and purposes, you go to,
I could have
with all
gone
due
to
respect,
Northern
Newfoundland, or God
Manitoba.
only knows
Yeah,
where, right?
could have been anything. So,
Yeah.
okay, someone's going to BC.
Now, you were already married then?
No, I was single when I went.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I met my husband in Terrace at my first
Yeah, okay.
post. So, and then he drew a dot kind of northwestern BC. And I was like, I don't know what's up there. And he goes, this is Terrace. I was like, okay, what's a terrace? I had no clue. And he goes, and Jenn Cooper and so-and-so are going to Terrace. And I was like, where? Because I had asked.
You had no idea.
No clue. I had asked for Surrey, Langley, Maple Ridge, Coquitlam, Burnaby, you know, anything in the lower mainland. I thought Hope would be far enough from home for me. Hope was getting extreme. And lo and behold, I went to Terrace.
Yeah.
So, but you know what? I have no regrets.
You were there for 5 years.
Yes.
And so in Terrace, just for our guests that are watching, how many people there? 10,000 in that area?
Less than. I think maybe creeping up to 10,000 if you include Thornhill.
And it's a very beautiful community, actually.
It's lovely.
Yeah. How far would it be from here by car or
6 hours drive from here.
Yeah. And so about 500-600 kilometers in that area.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then it's a very beautiful, beautiful area. Same as Prince George, actually. Northern BC is absolutely beautiful, right?
Yes.
Once you're here and you get used to it, you'll never leave it, you know, because it's so many things here that are so attractive, right?
That's right. Yeah.
Now, if you're part of a member of the RCMP and Terrace, does that mean the region? Because if I look at it here, you know, we have the RCMP here with the beautiful building that they have on 4th Avenue and Victoria Street, I believe. And but then we have also the regional RCMP that is on 5th Avenue, a big building.
Yes.
What is the difference between them?
So the building on 4th and Victoria, that's the one I work out of, and that's Prince George City RCMP.
Okay. City
so
only.
We take care of Prince George City and our surrounding areas. So to the south, and you know, we share a border with Hickson. Thank you. All I had was Houston in my head, and I knew that was wrong.
Worries,
Hickson, and you know, halfway to Vanderhoof. You know, kind of
plus or minus, or you work closely together with the RCMP and Vanderhoof. That if something happens and it needs attention, then you communicate as to who will go there.
Not so much. No, we stick pretty closely within our borders. Yeah.
Okay.
But you know, our surrounding region for Prince George is really extensive. Our rural members can sometimes have a file 2 hours from here.
Yeah.
Because we have quite a wide geographic area that Prince George City covers.
Yeah.
Then there's the detachment on 5th and Ospika. That's our North District building.
Okay.
So that houses a lot of our integrated units, but also the senior management team.
What is integrated units?
We have some integrated units, like BC Highway Patrol works out of there.
Yeah.
Also our major crime unit that kind of helps our outlying detachments in North District. So within the province of BC, we're divided, the RCMP is divided
right
into...
up to the Yukon border? Yeah.
So we're divided into 4 districts. We have the Island District, Lower Mainland.
Okay.
Southeast District was kind of the Kootenays area.
Right.
And the North District, and we cover 70%
huge, big
of the geographical area of BC
Wow.
is considered North District RCMP.
How do you cover that? Because if because we are only halfway through the province here, and that to Vancouver is 800 kilometers. It's probably about 800 kilometers to the Yukon border.
Yeah.
So if this is not saying, hey Jen, step in the car and just drive over to the Yukon border, no, it's not going to happen.
So we have 37 detachments spread throughout the North District RCMP area, and we have members everywhere. And some of our detachments are large. Prince George is the largest, so we have 150 roughly members working out of it, just in Prince George City. And then we have some detachments in North District that are 2, 3, 4 members, and that's their whole detachment.
Yeah. But they again working closely together with the.
They do, yeah. And so the office on 5th and Victoria, the North District building, the integrated units help those smaller ones. So like our major crimes unit will help take up some of the bigger files and help out. BC Highway Patrol goes all over our North District, stuff like that.
Now the other thing then, just for people that are watching and that may be contemplating the RCMP, is saying that once they have allocated you in, like in your case, to Terrace, and then you met your husband there and you were there for 5 years, and then could it happen that you say, hey Jen, sit down, so we're going to send you
no just your first one is like that. No. It may be a long time ago, but after your first posting, after your first placement, then you kind of get to work with staffing and say where you'd like to go, or maybe you're looking for a promotional opportunity. So you look at different places that might have
by
something
choice.
that you're looking for.
Yeah,
definitely.
But it wouldn't disrupt your family or anything like that, right?
It's usually done in consultation, and you want to go there. Hopefully you want to go there, but
Yeah. Now I remember, I spent 5 years in Watson Lake, and from 1967 to 1972, and saying, well, what were you doing there? It was a lumber mill. Actually, I was there, and I was hoping to build a lumber company and all that other kind of stuff. And and you're probably familiar with the Watson Lake region there.
Yes.
Very small, relatively speaking. It's on the Alaska Highway. Used to be then. I used to drive to the from here to Watson Lake would take a couple of days or so.
Yes.
But the challenge on the driver, as soon as you got to Den, Dawson Creek, mile 0, the railroad was like this. It was scanning, like this, all the way up to and beyond Watson Lake. Reason for it was that it was a defense road. That's how they built it, the Americans. They were concerned during the Second World War that aircraft would come and then aim at the convoys that were on the road. And so it was not until much later that they changed it. It's still, as I understand it, pretty much all paper, not quite as crooked. But it was not uncommon then that if you drove on this gravel road, that for 4, 5, 6 hours you could not pass anybody because you couldn't see anything.
Oh, okay.
Just to stay behind somebody, and fair amount of accidents happen because of the terrain, the lack of knowledge that people had. But the other part about it is that Watson Lake being relatively small, probably 1,200 people or so at that time, is that they had, again, must have been a regional hub of some sort. They had probably less than 10 offices, I would think. And I got to know some of them, and that was probably one of the placements that, you finish in Regina and saying, you know where you're going? Watson Lake. and a lot of them, that was the first placing.
Yes, a lot of our northern postings rely on our cadets coming out of depot to supply their to keep their numbers up. So
Yeah.
it's a good place though to learn.
Yeah.
You know, you learn to think on your feet, you learn to work on your own kind of thing.
Yeah.
Here, you know, there's a lot of backup here. In some of our bigger detachments, you have a lot of people that
Yeah.
are able to come to calls with you and able to be with you. But a lot of our smaller posts, you have to think about how to solve these problems, and
Yeah.
you might be it.
Yeah.
You have backup on the phone maybe, but
Yeah.
some places backup is 45 minutes away.
Yeah. So it's a
Or more.
real learning school in a way,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, it's a different type of policing when you're working with fewer people around you
Yeah.
to support you, for sure.
And it's sometimes, you know, that obviously from my experience and even from being there or in other places, you know, the jobs can be quite challenging, and especially if you deal with situations where trauma is involved and people
Yeah.
get hurt or damaged, or you have to deal with very troubling situations sometimes.
Definitely. One of the benefits of working in a smaller detachment like that, though, is you build relationships with the community on a different level
Very
than
much
you
so.
do in a bigger kind of city center.
Yes.
You know, here we do community outreach, but there's 27 elementary schools and 5 high schools I think we have here.
Yeah.
So, you know, even trying to get to all of them is an incredibly big job.
Yeah.
Whereas if you're in a smaller post, you might have only one elementary school and one high school that you have to visit, and they only have a couple hundred kids. So you get to know them more, you get to know the elders more.
Yeah.
So when big things happen in the community like that, the relationship between the RCMP and the community is
It draws
different.
them closer
Yeah.
together. That's what I found is a lot of them, I knew them either by name or I simply knew them from
Yeah.
encountering them somewhere, you know, and all in good settings, obviously, you know, that you get to know each other and, you know,
Yeah.
and that's all part of it, right? And in some cases, you know, even the RCMP is counting on the population to assist wherever they can in some difficult situations that may occur.
Yeah.
Which is not uncommon, right?
Yeah.
How do you acquire these skills? Because you get taught a certain amount in your training, the 6 months that you do. How do you acquire the ability to deal with those difficult situations that, you know, they can talk about it, but then living it and encountering it is altogether different?
It is. So after our 6 months in depot, we're paired up with an experienced police officer for another 6 months. And we work kind of on a gradually we learn to work on our own. But for the first 2 months, usually we're paired up quite close, work side by side with them for 2 months. And so kind of learn from an experienced officer what to do in different situations. Not that you can cover them all, but, you know, we've come a long way with how we have our officers deal with traumatic situations, especially I'd say even in the last 5 years, especially with how we approach mental health and trauma response in police
particular,
officers.
right?
Yeah.
I remember, you know, and we'll talk about this a bit more because we know mental health in particular in all those situations now, not unique to this area, but all over the place are very, very difficult situations. We're still trying to, you know, get how do we deal with it, but not as RCMP, but as a community, and what can we do and what should we do, and the reason that it is in my mind that you know, I was born, as I said, in 1940, and you know, when I was 4 years old, it was in the northeastern part of Holland. You know, we were then invaded by the German armies and under occupation, and things got pretty rough. And my mom had 3 kids. I was the youngest, and by then, nearly 5 years old, 4 years old, and 1944, and still remember, you know, the things dealing with war and with planes and bombers overhead, and hundreds of them, and then feeling the anxiety by the parent. My dad was, you know, in the Dutch army, was drafted in April of 1940, and we really didn't know if he was dead or alive for 5 years. So all of that stuff, and then the hunger winter of 1944-45 was the hunger winter, was extremely cold, and a lot of people, either died and under those circumstances, but it became very, very difficult. And then even as kids, 4 or 5 years old, and my sister 1 year older than me, and my brother 2 years older, the three of us had gunny sacks and would look for food and whatever there was to eat or to burn. And we would go as kids, because if it was an adult, you would get shot. Potentially here they would just boot you. And, but all those things had the effect of trauma.
Yes.
PTSD, in fact. And I remember, the other feelings of the inner child, the fear of losing the protective parent, so that always stayed with me.
I bet.
Yeah. So, and so if I look back at it then, also a lot of people that came from the war, even after my dad got back, after 5 years, the family was never the same again.
I bet. That would be incredibly difficult to just pick up.
And the parents were not really, and either there was not much assistance as there is now, more counseling and all those kinds of things. Still not, bringing it back maybe, but all those things were difficult to deal with. The other thing that then in Holland and in the post years that I remember is that people that had challenges, or the community really didn't know what to do about it, and a lot of times they went to special places where they kind of were held, if you wish.
Yeah.
And that obviously all changed, and then, but with all of that, other problems developed. And simply what I'm saying is that some of the trauma that is involved will always stay with an individual.
Yeah.
And I kind of looking at RCMP in particular, that is so exposed to all of that, to deal with that, must also be a challenge, because I remember as a kid seeing people being shot. That when we were liberated by the Canadians, actually April the 12th, 1945, and I always remember it because they were the ones that fed us with bread and cheese, and and there was a little schoolyard behind us where there was an health thing located with about 25 Canadians, and we would go there every morning, and they would feed us the bread, and although we didn't speak the language, but we did, and everybody was called Johnny and blah blah blah. It's such an impression on me,
right,
that I always knew from that point forward I would go to Canada, the land of my heroes.
Now I understand why you say that.
yeah, that's the reason why, and still. Then looking at the other things, like you and the people in the force, I sometimes wonder, how do they manage this? Because they get exposed to some of those difficult situations, and they must have somehow the ability to manage with that. And which must be sometimes difficult.
It is. We are getting a lot better at debriefing after some of our larger kind of traumatic files that we go to, some of the traumatic stuff that we deal with. But we're getting a lot better at recognizing that not everybody's trauma response is the same.
Right.
So, you might have a handful of people go to a traumatic file with, maybe someone's died or injured, or maybe an RCMP officer is injured, or and some people might, okay, that was difficult, but on we go. And some people might need take some time to themselves. And we're learning to accept that and accept the differences in how people respond to trauma, and give the people space that they need. We're learning and recognizing now that just because it didn't bother me today doesn't mean it won't bother me 5 or 10 years from now.
And learning the process of reaching out and saying,
yeah, and encouraging everyone.
I need help.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah. We're learning, just because something happens, to another police officer, it might not affect all of us,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
If we go back to even the shooting in Vanderhoof,
Yeah.
lots of us weren't there. There was a handful of people that were there.
Right.
They were directly affected, but it impacted all of us.
Yeah.
Maybe we knew the people that were there. I knew several of the people that were working that day.
Exactly.
You start to wonder, is my detachment safe?
Yeah.
You start to look over your shoulder. You jump at noises, right?
Yeah.
So we're learning that just because it happened at a different detachment or to other people, it might also still affect everybody that wears the same uniform, right?
Yeah. Now, if I watch the news these days, as we all do, and then seeing some of the things going on, in particular in the United States, where there is so much violence around it, and there is so much fear. And I'm not anti-gun, before gun. That's not the issue. But I'm obviously I was trained like you were in a way, being military, and but there's something about that if I watch these police officers in the States, and I'm not saying who is right and who's wrong, and who am I? I'm simply an observer. Is saying that if we stop somebody and we walk to that car, will there be a gun or something like that? And I can see that creates a sense of anxiety already before you even start doing something with it. So the I don't know how they manage that really, but I can see that makes those jobs in particular very challenging. Less so here.
Yes.
And I always say I'm the luckiest guy in the world because I live in paradise. It doesn't get any better than Canada. Actually, I fly a lot, and then going back and forth. We have a place in North Saanich. I call that paradise. And I sit in the plane and I look out of the window and say, my God, it doesn't get any better than here. And relatively speaking, although we have our challenges as a province and as a region and a community, but compared to some of the other places around the world, we're still very, very lucky here. And the relationships between, I grew up, I respect authority. Mm-hmm. I've always have.
Same.
To me, that's how I live.
Yeah.
So and and that makes our community much. Gives me a sense of comfort of being here, my family being here, and all the other things around it. So I'm kind of thinking all those things combined, how lucky we are really to be here, and so.
I reflect on that sometimes too. I was very fortunate to be born in Canada. I was fortunate to be born into the family that I had. We didn't have an incredible amount of struggle growing up, and I reflect on how fortunate I was, that happened for me, and I know it doesn't happen for everybody.
Right.
And I feel blessed to have had that upbringing, those opportunities that I had.
Yeah.
But as police officers, we also have to remember that not everybody had those same experiences.
Yeah.
And it makes policing very dynamic.
Yeah.
It's just something to keep in mind.
Yeah. Now sometimes it's all evolving. Like if I look at our community here, and it's just no different than Vancouver and some of the other communities where there are so many challenges with homeless people mm-hmm. that somehow are struggling with a number of issues that are difficult and communities are trying to deal with, and then that appears to be still very much a work in progress to an extent. It feels to me, Jenn, that I've been here for approaching 60 years, I guess. I came here in 1965. And it appears to me that during that period, that in particular in the last 5-10 years, homelessness and drugs in a sense, and the combination of all of those things have become more difficult.
It is a difficult road to kind of travel when we talk about some of our homeless population and those that are dealing with different substance abuse issues. There's no approach yet that seems to be that we've really kind of dialed it in and figured out how to help these people or what is the best way to help those who are living on the streets. And it's definitely we're learning now, I think, the hard way, that it's kind of a multi-agency approach.
Yeah.
And, we can't sit and point fingers at any one.
No.
You can't point your fingers and say it's a public health issue. You can't point fingers and say it's only a criminal justice issue.
No.
It's everybody's issue. We all have to figure out how to work together to kind of put supports in place. And I think we're just now kind of trying to figure out how to best manage that.
Right.
And who is responsible for what part of it.
Yeah.
But it's not any one agency that's going to resolve.
No, there are no
problems.
easy answers.
No.
It's a population issue that we have to deal with collectively, and first and foremost is be understanding that there are underlying issues there in a lot of cases that we cannot say it is minor or they should not be doing what they are doing. It's simply they are dealing with difficulties underneath it, and that's likely where it will have to be resolved, and that society as a whole has to be sympathetic to that, and then finding ways and then we still not doing enough to be responsive to it.
I agree with that.
And
yeah.
I don't want to be critical about it, but in a constructive way, so.
Yeah, I don't think we've quite figured out the right combination of supports and processes to help resolve, our homeless population. I don't want to say issues, that's not the right word, but,
No.
We're still working on it.
Yeah.
Is it pouring money into criminal justice? Is it pouring money into detox beds? Is it pouring money into, what is it?
Or is it all the above?
Is it all the above,
Yeah.
And in what percentages? Maybe, it's not a 50-50 split on things. It's,
Yeah. And is it also an issue of saying, how do I feel good about myself? I got a job. I got, I have a place to live, whatever that may look like, and how can we help and assist in creating that sense of comfort? Mm-hmm. I remember when I first came here, I didn't have any money. If you wonder what this is all about.
I was wondering.
Okay. So the other thing that happens.
I figured it's what I owed for parking.
So, what happened? So, I was not a success story in school. I failed grade 3, and then I failed grade 7 3 times. And so they said, what are we going to do with this guy? So, and I love my parents, and they were very, very good. And say, should we send them to the mentally challenged school, or should we get him a job in a trade? So luckily, they sent me to become a furniture maker, and I worked in a furniture factory. And
what age was that at, if you don't mind me asking?
14.
At 14.
Yeah. So and actually, when the third time I failed grade 7, and we got the report card, and again John had failed, and and my parents were loving parents. There's no question about that. And I came home, and the kids had a 3 weeks off, 4 weeks off from school, and so my dad said, okay, well that's it then. So he had a friend that had a clothing store, so we want that same Friday we got a report card. Sunday we went in the clothing store and they got me a set of coveralls. And the coveralls were for my size. I was small for my age. I had to roll them all the way up for the smallest one, and the crotch was hanging by my knees.
Oh,
Not cool then.
No.
Now it is, but it wasn't then. And so that's how I went to school. The other thing is that the friends that I used to have, all of a sudden now I was a laborer, not anymore a student. So they tend to be hard on me. But I was this ever-go-lucky kind of an individual in spite of it all. But I had a sense of failing, and I had to prove to myself that I could do it. And then my dream of going to Canada, so I tried to, when I was 18 or 17, to go to Canada then, and my parents wouldn't let me, and then I was drafted in the Dutch Air Force and for 2 years, and then worked when I came out for a forest company and the largest importer of lumber in Western Europe, actually in Holland. It was quite successful, but I still had that feel that I had failed and I had to start over. So I took my suitcase, 3 sets of clothes, 3 books, 4 books, 3 books, still have them, and and then I knew I wanted to go to British Columbia, and I wanted to start with nothing. So I took $150 suitcase, went to Vancouver, flew to Montreal, took the train to Vancouver 4 days, 5 nights. I thought this was going to go on forever, and I had some anxiety. So arrived in Vancouver, went to the immigration office, and then fortunately there was a German fellow that, and I could speak some German, and I told him what I wanted to do, and then he said, Prince George.
Really, even back
1965. He said, because I told him I wanted to build a sawmill, and he said, that's where you go, Prince George. So I took the bus to Prince George, 10 or 12 hours, as you know, and I came off the bus about 3 blocks away from here, and I counted my money, and I had exactly $25.47. And then, but the other thing that I had is attitude, passion, work ethic, and what follows is success. And and that's how I started. And then, they started out as a cleanup man and a lumber pile. There was a period that I had no money, that I slept underneath on the BCR side. An old building was there that nobody lived in, and yet somebody pulled it there. Somebody promised me a job. I walked all the way back from there to twice a day, because I had worked for a company in Quesnel for 1 month, and they had a paycheck. I was getting $2 an hour, and the paycheck of $150, $160 was there, and I thought they sent it to general delivery, but I didn't come. And then for 10 days I slept. This was before you came here. The entrance, I believe, into the old hospital was on the side, not at the end.
Okay.
And there was a tree, and I called it my tree, because I felt dizzy, started to get dizzy sometimes, because I didn't like to eat for nearly 10 days. I found a bag of cookies, and so, and then finally I got hired, and then very quickly from there, and I rose in the ranks, although I couldn't speak the language all that much. It was a year and a half I was a superintendent. But the time that it becomes desperate, that you start wondering, but I had this goal, that I would prove to myself that I could do it. And, so the feeling of having goals, and whatever that may be, not necessarily building sawmills, all that kind of crazy stuff, but even just to have a house or get a job, or and I'm now thinking about the people that are, the coasting around, and that have issues with alcohol, with drugs potentially, but underlying, a lot of the people that I know that have been struggling have difficulty in reconciling that underlying foundation in some form. And I'm not saying that's the answer, but but we have to go into that direction, that there is hope, right?
Yeah.
And that sort of thing, so.
Yeah, I can't speak for everybody who lives, in a state of homelessness, but many of the people that I have talked to have had incredibly traumatic experiences that they've not been able to resolve, or they've not known who to go to help them resolve them. So that increases the difficulty in trying to, deal with substance abuse issues or deal with anything like that. So, it's such a layered, I go back to the Shrek movie. People are like onions, and no matter how many layers you peel off, there's still more underneath, and it's trying to figure out what layer to deal with first. And sometimes it's hard to know what layer to deal with first.
And a lot of times, and again, that's why I kind of said to you about the Second World War. My dad, when he came back, he was never the same again after that. The relationship, although my mom and dad were close, but they did never become, they were not good, he was not a good communicator.
Right.
And then alcohol became an issue, although he was very successful in his career, but still he was kind of a closet alcoholic and relied on that. And, the other thing I was going to mention to you that you may find somewhat interesting is that, so by the time I got here and then was quite successful, blah, 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 and all that kind of stuff. And then one day I had failed, right, in terms of being in school, not even getting a diploma. In Holland is that if you want a career, that's one of the reasons that I had to kind of start over again in my mind, is that saying, what kind of diplomas do you have?
Right.
Well, I haven't got any diplomas, but regardless of that, I would have done okay. But, but in my mind, then I didn't. And then so when I came here, then I was already 57 years old then, so I already was successful in my mill. Everybody said, oh, he's so successful. I didn't feel that way. I still even then felt that I had been a failure. And I was in the Books on 4th. I don't know if you've been there or not, the bookstore that is there.
Yeah.
I just use this as an example. And so somehow I picked up a book, and I looked at the book, I opened the book, and it was called Driven to Distraction.
Right.
And I have no idea as to why I opened it and looked at it. And as I read more about it, ADHD.
Okay.
And I said, that is me. And so I kept reading the book and going more through it, and finally the guy that owned the store said, are we going to buy it or what? No, not quite, but
Yep.
So I bought it and I wrote in Dutch. Now I finally know who I am. And because there was still shame even about that, ADHD.
Right.
What you're going to do, you're building a sawmill and all the other things, and then you talk to your banker and you say to the banker, well, I got a mental problem here. And you say, well, have a nice day. So not quite like that, but potentially.
Yeah.
Right? So what I then did is I saw that. I'm going to show you something. And so it took me probably... Now I knew, in my mind, then I want to Google and do all the other things that we do.
Yeah.
And the more I saw, the more I knew it was me. It took me 5 years before I talked to my doc about it. And the doc was a personal friend, delivered to my 2 daughters. And then it took me 5 years before I walked into his office, and he said to me, hey, John, why are you here? I said, I think I've got ADHD. So we talked about it and then agreed, that's what it was. And then it took me quite a number of other years after that I started talking about it more and more. And probably 6, 7, 8 years ago, I started to even further talk about it. Mm-hmm. And
I saw your face on the billboard by Krell there.
Yeah,
with your book. Yeah.
Yeah, with this one.
Yep.
So the first thing that I did is that, and I'm going to give you copies of these books.
Well, thank you.
I'm signing them for you. So the first thing that I did is I always wanted to write a book. And the amazing thing, and this is not uncommon for people with ADHD, I call it a superpower, because it allows you to do 20 things all at the same time. and so I always wanted to write a book, and I started writing and then waited a number of years and then wrote again and then. And then finally I said about 5 years ago, something like that, if I don't do it now, it's, it won't happen. So I made up my mind I was going to do it. And then I wrote this book here, Against All Odds. Now, the challenge is that it's an autobiography. You can't write it and then, 6 months later you say, well, I'm going to do another one. This one's not good enough. The first one has to be right.
Yeah.
And then the other thing that I wanted to do is, that write about, not about how successful John is, hurrah, hurrah, but in spite of it all.
Right.
And so that's what I did. So that is this one. I said it took me 80 years to live it, 20 years to think about it, 2 years to write it. I'm going to sign this one for you. And
Fantastic.
then the other one that I did, and I started talking about it more and more, about the different issues, about PTSD, the inner child, ADHD. And, I had the honor of receiving an honorary doctorate from UNBC.
That's amazing. Congratulations.
Yeah.
What an accomplishment.
Yeah. Can you imagine the guy that finished grade 7?
That couldn't finish grade 7. Yeah, honorary doctorate. That's
Yeah.
unbelievable.
And probably today I'm one of the most active speakers, even in down the coast and in other places where I'm doing a lot of speaking, and obviously I've done a lot of podcasts. The other part about it, Jenn, which was interesting about the human mind, is up to the time that was 1990, that I was 50 years old, I had extreme difficulty interacting with people, other maybe than 3 or 4 in my group. And then something happened that kind of changed my life in a way, is that my ex-sister-in-law dragged me to Toastmasters.
Oh, really?
And I said, I'm not going to go there, because what are they going to do there? They're going to ask me questions? No. They want to. I said, okay, but I really didn't want to go, but I did go. And I went there, and then during the meeting, they said, hey, John, tell us who you are. And I said, oh my God, that if I would have known that, I wouldn't have gone there. So anyway, then I went back again the following year, and then I did go for 10 years. I became one of the most active Toastmasters. That is now the distinguished Toastmaster, the highest level of Toastmasters. And, and do a lot of public speaking and all the other kind of things. So, so that's kind of helped me, taking me forward, allowing me to do this. And then the other one about ADHD, I felt I had to write about that. And so this became the ADHD book, quite popular actually, it shows that the stigma around it is not acceptable, in my opinion. It's a superpower. And I find over and over again, virtually on a daily basis, that people say, yeah, I got it too. The other day I was in a meeting with about, must have been 20 executives of in all in the ages of 35 to 40-ish. And I was supposed to I was with 2 other fellows, and they were going to talk about the lumber industry. And I was the last one to speak, and I thought, well, I'm not, I may as well talk about a different topic, but rather than, so I talked about the books and the ADHD. During that presentation, there were 3 people that stood up and say, I have ADHD. I've never told anybody, but I do.
Incredible.
And that still happens virtually on a daily basis. I'm going to give you a copy of this one too.
I'm excited to read that one, actually. I've been wanting to read that. It's funny that you call ADHD a superpower. My son, I love him to bits. He and I work very similar in some ways, and then very differently in other ways. So sometimes I have a hard time figuring out how to relate to him. And we found very early on that he's very susceptible to red food coloring, treats with high fructose corn syrup, couldn't give them to him. And he struggled with that because he wanted the same things the other kids were getting. And so, and he would get incredibly hyper and a little bit almost aggressive too, which, you know, when you have a toddler, that can be a little bit hard to manage. And so I would always say, that's your superpower. Your superpower is becoming this incredibly busy little guy. And we have to learn how to control your superpower if you want to have these things.
Did you diagnose him and all that?
No, you know, he's doing really well.
How old is he?
He's 8 now. So, you know, careful monitoring of his diet, how much sugar he gets, how much red food color, you know, food dye he has access to. We're managing. He's doing phenomenally well in school right now. So, you know, his teachers have said, we don't need to diagnose. We're doing well. He's on track. But we always talk about his superpower. Like, Bud, do you think you should have that candy cane? Can you control your superpower today? No, Mom, I don't think I can. Maybe I shouldn't have that. So it's interesting that you call ADHD your superpower.
There's no question about that.
And that's how I've always talked to, because I didn't want to stigmatize him. I didn't want to say you have bad behavior. You can't control yourself.
No.
I'd say that's your superpower. How are you feeling about it today?
Without that, I would have never been able to do what I did.
I bet.
No question about that.
Yeah.
And even still today, as the guys know around the room here, that, you know, last number of weeks have been probably some of the busiest ones in my life. They have a hard time keeping up with me. And I'm 82 years old, you know, so, you know, and part of that is the ADHD. No question about it.
A lot of successful people actually have ADHD. A lot of very successful people, because you operate
no question about that.
Outside the box that I operate in. My learning and my personality is very
no question about
patterned.
That. My grandson Holden is I think he is 6 or so, ADHD. And you know, so you know, so the other thing I was going to say to you is that you know, I wrote another book that's coming out in July, and
you just don't stop, do you?
This one you like, because I say, and it's so much you know, relates to you, and is that finding your passion, living the dream, and that's a book that is not only to young people but also those that are in jobs that they say, and I find it frequently, and I'm sure you do too, say, I hate my job. But if you hate your job, that will affect everything that you do, your family, your friends, and all the things in your world. I say, change it, you know, turn direction, you know, and that's easier said than done, but do it in a way that, you know, being able to make the decisions, but first understand it, how important it is, because at the end of the day, like in my case, that's why I wrote on this one, attitude, passion, work ethic. And what follows is success. Success doesn't mean making a lot of money. Success means that, you know something, I enjoy what I'm doing, you know, and that is the big plus of it all. So that book will come out, I'll get you a copy of that too. Excellent. Will come out in July.
Okay.
And oh, this is scary. And then we're doing another one that we are starting, and that will come out in July the following year. And that one is called Living Young, Dying Old. And it's basically saying, how do you, you know, longevity, not terms physically, but mentally, physically, all the things in combination. And part of it follows that, is that, you know, that if you take care of yourself in terms of your body, you know, you don't have to be bodybuilders and all of that kind of stuff, but at least stay active mentally, physically, you know, that will help. And then diet and a lot of other things that are related to it. So I'm going to write about that, you know, and as an inspiration to potentially others.
That's, you know, my husband and I talk about that a lot. We have lots of plans for when we retire. And
when you get old.
When I get old. And we talk about what do we have to do now to make sure that we can do all those plans when we're older. You know, what health choices do we have to make now? What exercise choices do we have to make now? And we're not saying we have to go crazy into it, but just how do we get to retirement and still have the ability to travel the world? You know, we have plans to go camping all over North America.
Absolutely.
But we want to be able to do it and enjoy it and not, you know, have to worry about our health while we're doing it. So
Exactly.
we talk about that with frequently.
I will be 83 in November this year, and so I'm 82 right now. My wife is 74, so we, you know, I'm still very, very active. She is too in a way. You know, we have a farm in North Saanich. You know, we have horses. She rides English dressage. So do I, and you know, and then all the other things that you know, stay busy in all the things that we do. And the key is, it's not about money or anything like that, but being reasonably contented. I always say, and this kind of, you can relate to that because we both went through the same thing, is that I usually get up at 5:30 in the morning. The first thing that I do is I make my bed. I always make my bed. I may not quite do it, you know, like you and me got, you know, but I do that, and then I'm ready to go. And then usually there is not many times that, you know, sometimes days are challenging, as you know, but by the overall, I like it. I enjoy it.
Yeah. I feel very fortunate to have gotten the media relations officer role as early in my career as I did, because I was just, you know, coming up on 9 years when I got this spot. And I love it. I'd wanted it since pretty much day one when I was in Terrace. We had a media relations officer there, and I looked up to her, her role, and I thought, man, I could do that role. You know, I'm an English major, so public speaking and writing were easy for me, and I thought I could do that. And when I landed it here in Prince George, man, did I feel fortunate. And it's funny because I have a lot of police officers who say to me, I could never do your job. That seems so difficult.
Comes natural to you.
Comes natural. I'm like, this is not, I got this. There's very stressful times. It's not, you know.
Obviously.
Some days are much more stressful than others, or harder or challenging, but, you know, they're challenges that I'm excited to face, and they, you know, suit my skill set incredibly well. So I feel very, very fortunate to have gotten this role.
No question about it.
And they can't take it from me. I'll fight them.
No. I'm going to sign these for you, Jen.
Excellent. Thank you.
And
I'm incredibly excited to read this ADHD one.
Yeah, I
am. My brother has, they called it ADD back when he was diagnosed as a kid. So that was something that I grew up with in my household. My husband was never diagnosed, but I think he could have been.
Should I give you more than one book here?
No, we share.
Yeah,
we're
you
good.
should.
We're good at sharing.
This is one for you.
Excellent, thank you.
And then, and I'll make sure you get it. We'll talk again, you know, and then, you know, I'm going to get you a copy of the other book too as soon as it comes out.
Fantastic, thank you.
Anything else that comes to mind, Jen, that you like to talk about?
No. It's been a
Pretty
pleasure.
soon you got to go because you got a meeting at 3:30. So.
I do, yes. But it's been a pleasure to be here. It's been a pleasure to be on your
Jen,
podcast.
my pleasure.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.